101 series organized by 180 Degrees Consulting HR College. 180 DC HR College is one of the first undergraduate 180 Degrees Consulting branches in Bombay, with our vision of employing unconventional methods to create and sustain diverse business and non-business ecosystems. Our training series, Consulting 101, provides benefits to all viewers, such as covering the basics of consulting and prerequisite knowledge for being a consultant, preparing you for real life consulting projects. Most importantly, these are conducted by mentors from top notch consulting firms. On this note, I'd like Ishika to go ahead and introduce us to our speaker for today.
Hi, very good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible. Okay.
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah. Uh, First, I would like to introduce our speaker today. Sooraj is an associate consultant at Cedar Management Consulting. He has worked across sectors including financial services, retail, F&B, real estate, textiles, and industrials and geographies, including the Middle East and India. He has also been earmarked to lead the chairman's office, where he advises a leading Indian NGO assisting in internal strategy and managing the family office. He's also interested in finance and investing and is a CFA level third candidate. Suraj has also co-founded an NGO called the Sea Change Project, which aims to empower the visually impaired section of society. Last but not least, he's also very passionate about startups, sports, travel, and mentorship. I think the list goes on and on. I mean, we are really glad to have this session with you, sir. Thank you, Suraj, for joining us today. Thank you very much. And now I would like Tirtha to take it forward.
So it's going to be an interactive session. So, I would highly recommend if everyone could switch on their videos. And secondly, please mute yourselves during the session, and only during the Q&A session, y'all could unmute yourselves and ask questions. But in the middle, if y'all have any questions, please free to type it on the chat box. And of course, it's going to be cleared. Of course, your doubts are going to get cleared. So here, please welcome Mr. Suraj. And thank you so much for having this session. And yes, please, could you start the session?
Sure. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible? Am I audible to everyone? Yeah.
Yes, Suraj, you're audible.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ishika, for the very kind introduction. Thank you, Ahan, Tirtha, and the rest of the team for putting this all together on such a short notice. So again, the introduction's been done, but I think one element was sort of forgotten, and that's the fact that I'm also from HR college. So it gives me a lot of joy and a lot of happiness to come back and talk to all of you guys. I probably passed out at a time when y'all weren't in college, but I'm still very connected with the college. So it's a great feeling to be here and to try to share my 4 or 5 years of experience and client situations and consulting experience with you guys. So that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm quickly just like in standard consulting, I'm going to set the agenda first. And then, after that, we'll just roll through the session. Like Tirtha said, I'm super excited to talk to you guys. I'm super excited to try and guide you guys in whatever way that I can. So let's just keep it as interactive as possible. And, I'll try and do my best to share, whatever little I've learned in the last 4 to 5 years. So the agenda basically, guys, is that first, I think we're done with the first part, which was basically a bit of an introduction to, the club, to me and to what we're doing. The second section is going to be focused around, I'm going to give you a small 2-3 minute brief on consulting, and then we're going to go and understand case interviews and, case interview frameworks. So that's going to run for about, 20 minutes or so. Happy to extend it or reduce it depending on how it goes. And then we're going to jump into a bit of a live project case or a live project example, simply because, I think it'll be a lot more beneficial for me to take you all over, real life experiences and real life client situations. When I was, 18, 19, 20, I wish that I had that opportunity to, see how consulting really works and, see how the nuances of client-facing, research, secondary research, primary research work. So I'm going to try to take you guys through, a real-life example. And yeah, just to, I think that'll run for about 45 minutes. And then just to end it, basically, we'll do a 15-minute question and answer session, which is the section I'm looking forward to the most. Yeah, okay. So I think with that, I'm going to start. So guys, what is consulting? I mean, I know you guys are all part of the group. I know you guys have a lot of initiative and a lot of excitement about it, but I want it to be interactive. So I think my first question to you guys, and anyone's, feel free to chat, type on the chat box. What do you guys think consulting is? What do you think it entails? I'm going to leave it open for like 30 seconds. If anyone has any thoughts. Okay, I think Darshan says that it's advising on problems, keeping it really short and sweet, but I think that's the very essence of consulting. So fine, that's one aspect. Anyone else with anything else? Okay. I'm not sure. Even if I was you guys, I would be a little nervous. It's a new session, new guys coming on board and taking us through everything. So no issues. Okay, so consulting is, okay, I see Vaishnavi just said providing expert advice. So I think that's the essence of it, right? So what consulting is that it's basically a profession in which experts are hired to solve complex business problems, right? So very simple 7-8 word definition. So management consulting specifically is where you help businesses and corporate leaders and partners solve their business issues, right? So what I'm going to do, and you'll hear this word a lot today, and it's consulting's favorite word, it's called segment, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to break consulting into, I'm going to segment consulting into basically, how it's broken up. So the way consulting works is that it's segmented by industry, which means that you can basically work in financial services, you can work in industrial, you can work in retail, you can work in textiles, you can work in jewelry. So that's one way of segmenting it, which is by industry. The second way of segmenting it is by geography, because as you may know, you probably have clients all over, right? So I've worked with clients in the ASEAN region, I've worked with clients in the GCC, specifically in UAE, Oman, Kuwait, and then obviously clients in India. So that's another way of looking at consulting. And obviously the last and probably the most important one is by practice, right? Which is the essence of what you do. So when you say by practice, there's two streams to it, right? So there's the strategy formulation or design, and then there's the strategy execution and implementation. So the first part basically involves actually formulating the strategy, right? Which means actually, going about doing the market research, developing the business plan, developing the way forward. So that's about designing the whole problem statement. And then the second part pertains to the actual implementation, because a strategy is only as good as its execution, right? So the second part is basically, pertains to how you go about implementing the project. So I think that sort of covers, what I had to say about consulting, and I just try to segment it in a few ways so that you guys are familiarized with how it works. Yeah. So I think if you all have any additional questions on consulting and on casing, I'll probably leave that for the Q&A section, and I'm just going to jump through to case interviews, right? So again, for any of you guys that are very keen on consulting, on being problem solvers, on analyzing business situations, so obviously the pathway to consulting is case interviews, right? So case interviews are basically the norm at every consulting firm, whether it's a massive firm like McKinsey or Bain or BCG, whether it's one of the big fours, whether it's a boutique consulting firm like Cedar. So I mean basically case interviews are the norm. So again, I'm not going to try to read through all of it. I've made some of my own notes as well, so I'm just going to take you all over it. So but basically a case interview is a hypothetical business situation that is provided by an interviewer to an interviewee. Um, Again, case interviews can be interviewer-led or interviewee-led, right? What that means is that an interviewer-led case interview is where the interviewer will be giving you prompts and will be giving you data and will be giving you information. So your job is slightly easier. McKinsey is an example of an interviewer-led case interview. And then the other sort of aspect is interviewee-led, which is slightly more tricky because it's like the interviewer goes a little bit like a statue, right? Like you have to drive the entire story, you have to drive the entire case. Literally, you get a 1-line or a 2-line problem statement, and then you have to speak for 40 minutes. So and try to solve the case and develop logical conclusions. So I think that's the essence of what case interviews are and how they're held. It's typically a 30 to 40-minute process, and it can go from maybe 2 to 3 rounds of interviews at a smaller firm or a mid-sized firm to 7 rounds. 7 to 8 is what I've heard is the maximum, at a firm like McKinsey. So I think that's the essence of case interviews. What I'm going to do now is that there's this gentleman by the name of Victor Cheng, who's considered the guru of case interview prep, right? So what I'm going to do is there are 4 key frameworks that he uses. So the way that I'm going to play this is I'm going to explain the framework to you guys and how you sort of dissect it and how you sort of segment it. But what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to give you all an example, right? Just so that it's not very textual and it's more, practical, and you'd probably be able to relate to it a little bit more. So yeah, I think let's start with the most popular one, the profitability framework. This framework is basically the number one or the most popular framework amongst all of them. And it's actually very simple, right? You literally see this chart and you're like, oh, okay, this seems like a 3-minute job. And it probably is sometimes, but basically the essence of the framework is that let's just take an example, right? Let's take a consumer electronics company, right? And let's say that the problem statement is that their profitability is down 10%. Okay, so that's literally what I just said is literally what the interviewer will give you, right? He'll literally give you those 2 lines and then he'll leave you to it. So the way to look at the profitability framework is that it's a very simple concept, right? It's saying that profit is basically your revenue minus your cost, right? It's literally that simple. So I mean, all of us know it, all of us have studied it. So obviously, when you get that problem statement, the first thing for you to do is to identify what the key issue is, right? So I mean, your profits could be down because your revenue has fallen, or your profits would be down because your costs have gone up, right? So the way consulting case interviews work, and consulting a lot in general works, is that you take a hypothesis, right? So let's say that your hypothesis is that profits are down 10% because revenues have fallen, right? So I think that's basically the hypothesis you share with the interviewer. And then the interview sort of looks at that and then tells you, okay, but revenue is not the problem, right? So basically then you pivot from revenue to cost. Again, just some basic sort of nuances that you'll probably know, but revenue is obviously your price per unit, right? Which is obviously your average price into your units sold, right? So typically in a profitability case, the issue will always lie with the number of units sold, just because the interviewer is trying to make it interesting. So obviously when you look at the number of units sold, let's say that we're still persisting with revenue. Okay, so let's say that the problem is because your units sold have decreased. So the way to there are 3 key steps when you find out that your units sold have decreased. One is you need to segment that number, because knowing alone that your units sold have reduced is not going to help you. So you need to first understand whether it's whether it's related to like whether it's related to the product, so whether it's related to like fridges or microwaves or televisions. So whether it's by product, you can look at it by geography. Have the revenues declined because of the fact that uh, your revenues in in North America are reducing, your revenues in Europe are decreasing. So you need to so the first step is to segment it and to understand what is the lever that's causing this reduction in the units sold, right? So I think that's the first part. So I think once you do that, right, it's about asking the right questions and understanding whether the issue is by product line, whether the issue is by geography, whether it's by customer segment. I mean, what could be happening is that you're only getting your old customers and your new footfall is like zero. So, maybe that's a bit of an issue, right? So you need to, so basically you need to ask probing questions to understand what the segment is or what the issue is. And then you isolate it. And then later on in the case, which is the next 15-20 minutes, is where you go deeper into that problem, and then you analyze why that's happening, and you look at what are the reasons for it, and then and then you sort of give a recommendation. So that's sort of how it works. I'll just quickly go over the cost thing for like a minute. Same logic. Cost is basically, if it's a cost related problem, your cost can be segmented into the cost per unit, into the units sold, right? So again, your cost, typically the problem will again be in cost per unit, because they want to make the case more interesting. And as you all know, your cost is either fixed or variable in nature. And then, once you understand whether it's a fixed cost problem or a variable cost problem, the key is to again segment what aspect of it across the value chain is causing that problem. So when I say value chain, what I mean is basically you have to go over the entire process, right? So it starts with the raw materials, and it moves to the production cost, then it moves to the distribution costs, the selling expenses, and then sometimes you have after sales service and financing. So you need to understand whether the costs are changing in which sort of step in the value chain. And once you do that, you're home free, right? Because you've understood what's causing the problem. Then it's more about asking the right questions and analyzing why that's happening. So just in summary, the profitability framework is a very simple but effective framework, because it just breaks profit up into revenue and cost. And then basically you form a hypothesis, and then you move from each lever to the other to find out what the problem is, and then you isolate it, and then you provide your recommendations. So I think that's just what I wanted to share on the profitability framework. Okay, so again, this is the second most popular framework. I mean, it's not really a framework on the screen, but it's basically 4 boxes, but those 4 boxes are very, very relevant. So again, now here there's a little bit of room, right? As young individuals, as consultants, as smart people, to move away a little bit from the norm, right? Because Victor Cheng's framework says that, okay, we should look at customer, product, company, and competition, right? So I mean, what a business situation framework means is that it basically entails anything related to the business, right? It could be a market assessment and entry strategy related problem. It could be launching a new product. It could be changing your pricing strategy. It could be shutting down a product line. It could be anything related to your actual business, right? So let's just forget what's on the screen for a second, right? So whenever you're given a business situation problem, or whenever you're given a certain issue, the smartest way, especially if you're like me and you don't remember, you can't mug things up or something, the most logical way to look at a business situation framework is to look at it from 2 perspectives, right? One is the internal environment, and the second is the external environment. So the internal environment pertains to all aspects related to the company, right? And that's very specific to that company, right? So an example is the company's products, the company's customers, the company's distribution channels, the company's operational excellence, processes, technology capabilities. So that relates to the internal environment. And then the external environment is basically the external market overview, right? So that's where you look at basically what the market size is, what the market growth is, what the competition is like. You can use your, five forces. You can use, your pestle framework to understand what's happening on the whole political, economic, social sort of sphere. So I think here what I want to share with you guys, and we're going to cover market assessment and entry strategy as the live project for today. But what I want so what I wanted to share with you guys with regards to the business situation framework is that, it's really simple, right? We need to look at it from an internal environment perspective and an external environment perspective. And then obviously, depending on the case that you get and depending on the sort of problem statement, you'll have to see which levers become more and more relevant. So I'm spending a little more time on the business situation and the profitability framework because they're the two most popular ones. I'll go faster with the others. But basically, let's take like a simple example, right? For example, let's take like the consumer industry, right? Like the retail industry. And let's say that basically a company is looking to start a new line of shoes, okay, for example, and they're a footwear retailer, right? So for you to intelligently be able to give advice on that, you need to first understand the external market for it and how it's growing. And you need to also be able to understand the company's requirements, the company's capabilities. And that's the way you sort of blend them together and you sort of arrive at, a potential way forward. So when it comes to the external environment, first, for the footwear industry, you'll briefly look at the pestle analysis. You'll probably understand what's happening politically, economically, socially, etc. Then obviously the most important thing is competition. You'll obviously want to understand what your competitors are doing. Do your competitors have something similar, a similar product, a similar SKU? Do they have competitive advantage in that product? How are they pricing that product, for example? What are the distribution channels? Do they differ from the conventional distribution channels? And then, obviously you look at the overall, market and the market size, and then what the market's growth is. Is it growing at a low digit CAGR? Like, is it only growing at 3-4%? Is it like growing at 8-10%? So it gives you a sense of, okay, what is the potential for this business and for this product? And then you move to the internal environment, right, where you look at similar themes like you did for your competitors, but something that a lot of firms fail to understand, and that's why consultants are in demand and in business. It's because a lot of times the external environment paints a certain picture, but without understanding how that syncs with your internal environment, which means without understanding what your internal capabilities are as an organization, without understanding, your strengths and weaknesses, it's very difficult for you to implement, a new product line. Even if the market's growing at 12%, but you don't have the right design team, or you don't have the right operations, or your supply chain is not good enough, it's very difficult to execute it, right? So I think that's what I wanted to share on this business situation framework. Okay, so this is again really quick. This is the M&A fit framework, right? So what this means is this is the right framework to use when you're doing more of like a understanding of whether this merger or acquisition is going to work or not, right? Because this does not cover the whole financial aspect, the due diligence, and stuff that happens in investment banking. This is more about understanding synergies, identifying gaps, understanding what the cultural differences can be. So they say that basically the number one reason why M&As do not work out is because there is no cultural fit, right? Because it's very easy to still raise money, buy a company, merge with a company, but for it to work as a cohesive unit, or for it to work, it takes a lot more. And that's why cultural fit has become like, the new norm these days, and studying it and identifying the synergies and the risks. So again, really quickly, the simple way to do this, guys, is you look at you look at company A, right? You look at company B, and then you look at company A plus B. A plus B is nothing but looking at it as a cohesive unit. So, I mean, let's just take a fun example. Let's say that one tire company is looking to merge with another tire company, right? So like like say company X and company Y. So for company X, you'll obviously try to look at what their customers are, who their customers are. Sorry, you look at where they're based geographically, right? So let's say company X is very big in the Asia Pac region, whereas company Y has a strong presence in Europe, right? And they're looking to build a global sort of network. So in that case, because it aligns with the objective and because they have a different customer set, it could be a good fit. Then you can look at the products, right? Maybe company X is probably more skewed towards like the B2B space, where they're trying to work with other firms. And like, I mean, when I say other firms, I mean like, more in the heavy commercial vehicle space, whereas company Y is more, in the passenger vehicle space. So, there's some synergies there. Then obviously you look at the company, right? You look at the company, you look at their financials, their, you've obviously covered the customers, products, you look at the supply chain, you look at the operations, the processes, organization and technology. And then just to sort of look at the external environment, you look at the competition, you see how concentrated the market is. Is it oligopolistic in nature? Is it more fragmented? What are the benefits that will arise out of it? How aggressive is the pricing, etc., etc. And we'll discuss this when I go over the live case. So, but I think the key is you understand company X, you understand company Y, and then you need to also see company X plus Y as a cohesive unit, right? Because that's how it's going to stand to exist in the future. So you need to then identify what the potential synergies are. You need to identify what you need to basically look at what what are some of the risks that may be there. How is it a cultural fit, etc., etc. So I think that's what I wanted to cover here. Yeah. Okay. Again, so this is basically the capacity change framework. It's probably less used, I'd say, but again, I'm just basically I'll just quickly tell you guys what it's used for. So you use a capacity change framework when there are, like, when you're considering adding new capacity, or when you're looking at reducing capacity, or if you're acquiring a direct competitor. I mean, basically, the thing is that the rationale behind looking at it is that all of these decisions have certain implications on the demand and the supply side, right? So, I mean, basically on the demand side, what you probably look at is what the demand basically pertains to the customer. So you look at the market, what is the overall size of the market, what is the market share of that firm, how fast is it growing, stuff like that, and then you probably look at it by segment or by product. Then on the supply side, obviously, especially when you're doing capacity change, you want to understand what the industry supply is, right? Because you need to know whether there's a surplus of supply, whether there's a shortage, whether there's an actual need on the demand side. So I think those nuances come in. And then obviously you want to look at the implications. If you're looking to expand capacity, then what are the implications it will have on the prices, right? On the clearing price, on and what the resulting impact on your company's profitability. So I think that covers supply. And then obviously in supply, you look at, what is the rationale or the objective, right? So what is the objective behind increasing a capacity? Is it to get economies of scale? Is it for technological innovation? Is it to, bridge barriers, So I think that's another key aspect to keep in mind. And then, I mean, nothing in this world works without, looking at your cost, right? So I think here it's very important that you consider the real cost, which is the actual cost of the project, the capex involved, how many years that capex cycle is going to run. Then you want to look at the opportunity cost. You want to run some payback period analysis, ROI, and then again, it's something that's very underrated in consulting, is looking at alternatives, right? Because, let's say you want to increase capacity, right? But there are other ways of doing it, right? You can outsource it, you can lease it, you can subcontract it, right? I mean, if you, I mean, for all of y'all that go into, like, these stores like a Nature's Basket or a Reliance, Fresh. I mean, most of the products, right, from a lot of these big brands are all on contract manufacturing. So they actually don't want to take that whole risk up of, setting up more and more production facilities, and they're comfortable working with the contract manufacturer. So I think that sort of aspect of considering alternatives should also be done. So I think that's what I had to share here. Okay. See, so I'm just this. It's a very text-heavy slide, and it probably won't work in consulting, because in consulting they're very particular about the amount of text you put on the slide. But yeah, jokes apart. So I think I just wanted to end with, like, sharing a few tips and tricks. So I think one aspect to remember is that whenever you're doing any kind of competitive analysis, any kind of benchmarking, right? Especially when it comes to financials or other things, is there's two ways to do it, right? So one is you do it on the basis of the time period, and which is basically historical, and then one you do it on the basis of the actual benchmarking with competitors. So let's say that you're looking at the financials of Hindustan Unilever. If you just look at the 2020 financials, it's not going to paint a picture for you, right? So you need to look at the 2019 numbers, 2018 numbers. So at the very bare minimum, you do 3 years, potentially 5 years. And then the other way to so that'll give you a good sense of what's been happening historically and what the trend could be going forward. But that would still be incomplete, right, in a way. So you need to also look at the whole benchmarking aspect. So you need to compare Hindustan Unilever with a Britannia. You need to compare it with a Dabur. You need to compare it with a Marico. So I mean, from that standpoint, you need to make sure you get a good representative um, competitor list, and then you sort of go over the financials. So maybe your historic analysis tells you that, oh, but HUL is growing at 6-7% a year, their revenues are good, their profitabilities are good, but then when you sort of benchmark it with the industry, and you see that, okay, Dabur is growing at 15%, right? Their Ayurvedic line is growing at 20-22%, but HUL doesn't really have a play there. So bang, you already get like a great idea. Okay, wow, this segment seems very attractive. So I think that's important when it comes to analysis. You want to do both a historical one and then a peer one. Yeah, I think that's one of the main points. I think the other point we spoke about a little bit is the importance of the word segment, right? So especially when you're doing a case interview, and then also when you're doing consulting projects, it's very important that you segment, right? Saying alone that your customers have fallen by 20% tells you nothing, right? It just tells you, oh, okay, well, your customers fell 20%. But then if you segment it and you look at it maybe by geography, and you see that, oh, Asia Pac's growing at 5-10%, but North America's just exploded and it's fallen to like 40%. So I think that is where you understand the true essence of what consulting is, right? Because consulting is not about just telling somebody that, oh, your customer growth has declined 20%, but consulting is more about understanding why that customer degrowth happened, and then segmenting that, and then obviously looking at the implications of that, and then you do your analysis, and then you give some recommendations, right? So it's basically a profession where you just have to be very street smart and very logical and analytical, right? So then that's another thing. Yeah, I think again, I think that covers most of what we've been discussing. So just remember to do a thorough comparison, across time and across historic and peer comparison benchmarks. And then obviously you want to look at getting the right sample sizes. You want to look at, and you want to segment, right? That's the key, really. So I think that covers this section. Okay, great. So I think this covers the first section that I had in mind for you guys. So the objective behind it was just to take you all over, how, case interviews, are run, what are some of the key, what are some of the most common case interview questions, and then what are some of the most popular frameworks that are used to solve those, right? Because a big part of consulting, and if you remember, I started with stating the agenda, was that in consulting you have to be very organized and very methodological, right? Because sometimes it can all get very overwhelming very quickly. So i think I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start with a live project example, which is basically like a extended case, right? So the rationale behind doing that was that, since, I've had prior experience of working on it, I felt like I would be able to, share more about it. I'd be able to, maybe in some shape or form, because I believe you guys are all scheduled to start working and actually doing your own consulting projects and, helping out. This will take you all through like the life cycle of like a basic market assessment and, entry strategy problem statement, right? um, so I think that's what I have planned now for the next, half an hour, 40 minutes. Yeah, and any questions on case interviews we can take, at the end. Happy to discuss whatever you guys want. Okay, so the project background. So whenever you're doing a consulting project, right? I think laying down what the project background is, and stating and understanding what the project methodology is, which basically means how you're going to go about executing the project, gives significant confidence to the clients, right? Because I mean, the clients are going to cut you like, a check and be like, okay, why don't you help us with this, and why don't you give us strategic advice? But the thought here is that, obviously it's going to be very hard for them to, understand everything without stating what the background is, and then without stating what the methodology or the objectives are. So with that, I'm going to just take you all through this case. Yeah. So basically, company A is a leading Indian packaging firm with operations across industries. And product X is an upcoming health foods and nutrition startup in Netherlands. And they have products in the nutraceuticals or the protein supplement space. So basically, the problem statement is that company A has mandated us to assess the market for the Indian protein supplements industry. Um, and then how you're going to go about it is you're going to obviously do a market assessment of the entire industry, and then you're going to try to recommend an entry strategy for company A, for them, to actually go about executing the plan. Okay, so again, I mean, that's what I was saying, right? The first objective is always to understand what the client's needs are and what the project background is. Then the second aspect is to carry out, secondary research to find, market data, competitive data, etc., etc. Objective 3 is to carry out primary research and interviews, right? So again, I think if you look at what we're doing, we're doing something in the F&B space, right? Because we're looking at, whey protein and nutritional supplements. I don't know how many of you guys use them, but it's become like this huge trend, right? This huge craze to fulfill your protein requirements. So I think whenever you're doing work in like the retail space, whenever you're doing work in the F&B space, in like the hospitality space, it's very important that you do some primary research, right? Wherever possible. It is in general, but in these industries, it becomes very important to understand what the customer feels. Then obviously the next phase, which is phase 1B, is to analyze, the regulatory, demand, market, import, industry, channel, and online environment, right? So it's basically looking at, what are the aspects that you need to consider when you do this project. Then obviously the next part is to analyze all of the data, and then obviously you conclude on it and then provide a way forward plan. So I'm just going to take a second and pause and leave it open to everyone. But if you guys were told to do a market assessment of the Indian protein supplements industry, what are the key 5 or 6 things that y'all would look at? Maybe you guys could share it on chat, or maybe there's some other aspects that you think are important. So I just wanted to get your sense and what you guys think on that. So I'm just going to leave it open for 30 seconds, and I want you guys to just share your thoughts on like what are some key things that you all would analyze or look at when you all are trying to analyze a particular industry or conduct market research. So I think okay, so we're getting size of the industry, we're getting target market, customer trends, competitive assessment, key players again. Yeah, so perfect, right? I think this covers a lot of the aspects. See, the thing is, whenever a client gives you work, they expect a very honest and open sort of answer. And Darshan says innovation ability. I think in today's day and age, it's a very good point, Darshan, because it's simply unavoidable, right? You have to innovate, you have to differentiate yourself. So yeah, so I think these are all super valid points. Like Ayush just mentioned, that you look at the future growth of the industry. I think that's a very important point, because while today you might understand the market to be, say, $1 billion, but if it's growing at only 3-4%, it may not make sense. Whereas if it's a smaller size, like say $200-300 million, but it's growing at 12-13%, I mean, it gives them a huge opportunity to scale quickly, right? So I think you guys have done a great job of identifying some of these elements. Tushar said potential customers. Yeah, it's super important you understand who your customer is and how you segment them. Yeah, we can go next. So this is just basically, we conducted 20 primary interviews with distributors, channel partners, competitors, to get a truly a 360-degree sense, because it's sometimes what you see online and what you hear in like the real market sense are very different, right? So it's very important that you do some primary research on that. And then we obviously did like a customer survey with like 40-50 respondents to understand what it is that matters, right? Because truly, when you're doing a product-based play, or a space, or a play in the F&B space, it's very important to understand what the customer wants. So these are just some key interviews that we conducted, and we shared, and I'll try and share, how that went later. So again, now the first aspect, right? Like all of y'all, I think most of y'all, 60-70% of y'all said that the first thing that we want to look at is the market. So spot on. Again, you want to look at the market from both a quantitative and a qualitative perspective. So I'd say here the quantitative aspect matters more. So you understand what the market size is, you understand what the growth rates are, what the market shares are like, who are the key players. And then you also want to understand the qualitative aspects. I believe Vritti mentioned that you want to look at the key trends. You want to look at, what are like the best practices or success factors. You want to try to get a sense of that as well. Yeah, we can go next. Great. So before you get into the market size, what you want to understand is and especially see, clients, this client was in the packaging space, right? So for them, this nutritional supplements thing is probably something new, right? Probably not if they have, customers in that area, but it's very important that you show them what the industry is, right? So the broad industry is called the nutraceuticals market, right? And that obviously then gets divided into functional food and beverages and then dietary supplements. Now, protein supplements is obviously a part of dietary supplements. So, the tick mark basically represents what is the focus area of this project. So it's just to show the client that, okay, fine, we know what we're talking about. This is the industry, this is the sub industry, and this is the focus area for us. And then within protein supplements, here we're focusing on powders and ready to drink. Somebody spoke about innovation. A classic example of innovation is ready to drink, right? Because you must have seen a lot of those big jars with like, protein powder in it and all of that. You must have seen protein bars. But ready to drink is a fairly new concept. I mean, now I think it's becoming popular. It's basically where it's already ready and it's in smaller size, packs. So you can just drink it, on the go. So you don't have to worry about that, carrying that big jar and everything, and mixing it and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think we can go next. Yeah, this is just another quick way of segmenting it, or how you look at the industry. So it sets the context for the client. So again, now when it comes to protein supplements, they can either be animal based or plant based. Whey protein is animal based, so that was the focus segment. But plant based is getting a lot of popularity. Again, there's various types within animal based. There's whey protein, casein, soy. So, and I think here the focus is whey protein. So we highlighted that. Then you look at the forms, right? So are you going to do it as protein powder, ready to drink, protein bars? Now there might be other ways of consuming protein. So others. Then applications is basically like where they're most utilized. So sports nutrition, functional foods, and clinical nutrition, right? This, like almost all athletes now use plant-based protein. I mean, you all must have seen the Virat Kohli ad and all of that stuff, because it's truly linked to enhanced performance. And last but not the least, you look at points of sale, which is super important in this industry, because you're looking at the channel, right? Like how you're going to go about distributing the product. So supermarkets, pharmacies, online is key, specialty stores, and then obviously you can sell direct in gyms and health clubs. So yeah. You can go next, yeah. So I think that visual on the left, right, it gives you such a strong message, right? Because it shows you exactly where India is right now when it comes to protein consumption, right? So if you look at India, I mean, we sort of made quadrants. So India is obviously low on GDP per capita, right? Given our massive population. And then obviously we're very low on per capita protein consumption, right? So what this chart essentially does is that it places India compared to some of the other leading countries, just to show the client, where India is currently, and then where it can reach in, like, say, a 10-year horizon, right? Maybe it can be where China is potentially. And then, yeah, on the chart, it's just stating basically, some key numbers as to what the total whey protein consumption is. So I'll cover it later. You can go next. Okay, so again, see, this is obviously an India play, because your client's based in India and they want to do an India market assessment and entry strategy. But clients typically appreciate when you share global data, right? Because there's a bit of a thumb rule also that India is, say, like 10 15 years, I mean 15 20 years behind, where like the European countries and America is 5 to 10 years behind where China is. So understanding where the global industry is and how it's moving is a good benchmark to sort of understand how potentially the industry may move from a long-term horizon. So and again, it's just to show you guys some of the data cuts that you typically be doing, right? So obviously you would want to see the split, right, between the protein supplements. So whey protein is 57% of the total protein supplement industry. I mean, so it basically comes up to about 8.4 billion, give or take, given that it was done in 2019, the numbers. And then obviously you want to see what are the forms that they're popular in, right? So I mean, the sort of summary is that, okay, protein powders are the most popular sort of variant. And I think what's interesting is then when you do the India analysis, you can sort of compare it to the global analysis and be like, okay, well, whey protein 65% of the powder, 65% of the industry, globally, but in India, it's, it could be 50%, could be 80%. So that gives you like an indication. And then again, see, I think the key here is that for most other industries, right, like especially pre-COVID, if you look at retail, if you look at, if you look at industrials, manufacturing, I mean, online was a very, very, very small component of the total market. But in this industry, online is like 53% of the total industry. So I think that's pretty significant. So doing a great online play becomes very important. Go next. Okay. So I think this is like your classic guesstimate question, or like, market sizing question, right? Because it's super, I mean, I think the rationale, even, I mean, so I've been in interviews where, people have been like, oh, if you had two people to paint this entire building for 9 hours a day, how much time would it take them? Or, oh, how many golf balls can you fit in an A380, right? So, I mean, I think there's two reasons why interviewers do that, right? I think one is to obviously is to see how the person copes under pressure, because consulting is a very high pressure environment. And I think the second aspect like relates to, just being methodological and just being able to find the right levers and arrive at, a logical sort of market size or a number, right? So, I mean, basically, this is just a quick sort of, it's just a quick way of dissecting the market and understanding the market size in terms of the number of customers, using a top-down approach, because obviously we're going to start with the population, then go downwards. So again, I'll just quickly take you all over it. So the population in India is 1.35 billion. 33.3% are obviously urban. So that gives us 450 million. See, the thing is here, it's very important to understand that whey protein and protein supplements is a fairly expensive, requirement. So it's probably, it's probably a product that would focus more in the urban regions. And then the next sort of lever could be income or age in any order. So when you look at the whey protein consumption, it's obviously going to be people that are between 15 to 59. I mean, it's a separate joke that I've seen, 12, 13-year-olds have whey protein and it scares me. But so I mean, that's the broad age group. And then obviously, so that becomes your target age group, which is like, 255 to 60 million. And then you sort of run another filter to understand the high income, right? Because you have, I mean, here you're taking a benchmark of like, say, greater than 5 lakh, 6 lakh. So again, here potentially 20 million odd people could be there. Then you look at the degree of fitness consciousness, right? Because it's like there's a high correlation between, people that are fitness conscious using these products vis-a-vis people that are not at all fitness conscious, right? And then again, if you want to go a level deeper, you can look at, active gym and fitness versus non-active gym, active gym, because it's technically, I mean, if you see, at least before, it used to be the case where people that didn't go to the gym did not usually consume whey protein, but now that trend is changing. So this is just like a quick dissection. We can go next. Yeah. So again, I won't spend too much time on this because we discussed it earlier, but it's just showing you that the nutraceuticals market is like, say, $7 billion in India, of which dietary supplements is like, 4.4 billion. And then, within protein supplements, you obviously have vitamins, minerals, herbal. So protein is only 22% of it. So it's about 850 million. So yeah. Yeah. And another thing I just want to bring to your notice, guys, is that if you see on the left, we've left the whole context setting industry chart that we had put earlier, because it just keeps reminding the client that, okay, this is how they're structuring their market section, right? So again, quickly, the protein supplements industry is at 940 million, almost $1 billion in size. Online is 61%. So that's actually very encouraging, because globally it was 53%, sorry. So I mean, clearly online is even more important in India. Animal sourced is 80%, which is pretty high number, but I'm pretty sure the plant source is growing at a faster rate. And then whey protein is 88% of it. So so the good news is that we're in the right space, right? Because animal source is very popular, and then whey protein is obviously a pretty significant size. So we can go next. Yeah, so this is basically just the whey protein market size is about 700 million. Powder is again 78%. Ready to drink here is only 13%. And then obviously India tends to import a lot of the whey protein, as you guys may know. So we just wanted to highlight that. We can go next. Yeah. So okay, so this is one of the qualitative slides, right? Where you want to understand, where you're trying to show the client that these are the growth drivers, right, for the whey protein space in India. So there's obviously rising disposable income in India. Per capita income was increasing at 8%. There's a greater awareness of fitness trends, and there's genuine effort, and it's obviously been heightened by COVID to live, a good sort of diet and a good lifestyle. There's increased distribution opportunities. I mean, the e-com is just booming, so there's a huge opportunity there. I mean, there are instances of people even selling, whey protein products, via food delivery apps like Swiggy and stuff. Then there's lots of different product variants. I mean, I remember 10-15 years back there was just one chocolate flavor, and now you have like banana peanut butter chocolate, you have like strawberry vanilla and stuff like that. So there's lots of different variants. Another key driver is affordable product options, and I cannot stress on how important that is in India, because India is a very price conscious economy. So Indian brands, domestic brands sell at 20 to 40% discount. So that's a big driver. And then there's obviously an increase in gyms, health clubs, and fitness. So, yeah. Okay, so another key aspect, right? Because you're obviously trying to understand what is like the summary of all of this, right? So I think basically here is just put them in quick bullets, but there's a high correlation between GDP per capita and protein consumption. So what that's telling you is that as the GDP per capita grows, it seems like there's higher protein consumption because it increases the affordability, and then it increases the purchasing power, and then that leads to higher protein consumption. This is just some stats about what we established earlier. And yeah, I think it's just a good way of like summarizing the key 6-7 bullets from like the whole market section. Okay, so we go into the customer. So we obviously want to understand who the customer is, segment the customer, understand what the customer wants, right? Because that's key to the success of any business now. So that becomes critical. So there's a small section on customer. So basically, this slide is like basically putting some bubble charts or like bubbles on speech bubbles on what the customers are saying. So the green sort of indicates the positive, and the red indicates the negative. So I mean, I distinctly remember that in India the trainer influence and the influencer influence is very high. So typically what the trainer says is what you buy. On the positive side, there are a lot of good international brands there. And then there's obviously in India, there's a lot of vegetarians. So from that standpoint, you need to fulfill your protein requirements. So that is a big opportunity. And then on the negative side, obviously, somebody actually said that, oh, I'm not entering a weightlifting competition, so I don't need to have whey protein. And then, there's also stuff about availability. It's not as easily available. And even the pharmacies and supermarkets that stock it in very limited, they give it very limited shelf space. And then, yeah, a lot of people prefer natural variants and plant protein, etc., etc. So basically, obviously, we did a bit of a customer survey. So these were some really interesting sort of insights that came out of it. So there's a 4x probability of gym to non-gym users that use whey. Typically, it's people that exercise 3 to 4 times a week that prefer using whey protein. 3 to 4 servings a week. So again, 70 to 80% of them buy protein powder due to price and convenience. So they're the two most important things. And I'll cover KPC in my next slide. But most people prefer chocolate. 90%, like I said, buy what their gym trainer or buddy suggested. Channel 60% buy online, 30% through specialty stores. Most people prefer imported brands. And there's a very high brand stickiness of brand loyalty, because 85 to 90% of them, like if you buy an Isopure, then you stick with an Isopure. So that was also a bit of a concern, especially when you're entering a market where there's high brand loyalty. Sorry, there's one more point about the fake or counterfeit products. I mean, basically, it was really fascinating for me to realize that there's a that the size of the market of the fake or counterfeit whey protein products is probably the same size as the whey protein market as a whole. So through some of these interviews, I found out that all these jars go to like this place in Bhiwandi, this place in somewhere around Crawford Market, and then basically they're like filled with like local protein and like some other chemicals and everything, and they're sold at a much cheaper price. So it was fascinating. So yeah. Again, here I won't spend too much time because we've discussed it, but this is just like a customer profiling, so you understand that your key audience sort of lies in that 10% that are active and that are going to be pioneers, right, of your product. So they're basically people that are open adults and working professionals. They have higher awareness of like global health and wellness. They want to live a better lifestyle, and then they closely follow health and wellness, and they're willing to pay a premium for high quality products and credible claims of benefits. So I think that's the key to understanding who your customer is. Okay, this is KPC. So this is key purchase criteria. So through all of the interviews that we did and all of the analysis, we realized that there's a few key parameters or factors, right? So, and then we try to basically map it to the criticality that each one holds. So influencers basically includes your gym trainers and other online influencers. I mean, now, people I mean, many people just like do a TikTok or do like a reel and they're like, wow, they become, an influencer, right? So influencers have a very high weightage in this industry. Second thing is obviously your protein content, right? Because everyone wants to maximize the protein content, which is basically the grams per scoop size. And then you also want to look at, the carbs. A lot of people do Isopure isolate because it has no carbs. So that's another factor. So it's quite important. Packaging, jars, tubs, sachets. I mean, jars and tubs are fairly more popular, but they don't have a huge implication on like the buying decision. Flavors matter, but it was interesting to note that they don't matter as much. Most people just like don't mind anything chocolate. And price obviously was a huge driver given India's the nature of the Indian economy, which is more price conscious. So obviously it had a high criticality. Okay, so I think that covers the customer bit. I'm just going to quickly take you all over the competitive landscape. But again, before you do that, it's very important to understand that when you're entering a new market, it's important you understand, like you do a 360-degree assessment of the competition, right? You need to understand both the domestic competitors and the international competitors. Two, you need to understand, then you need to focus on the key competitors and that are going to fit in your price point with your strategy, and then see how they sort of align, what their products are like, etc. So competition becomes a very important part of this report or this analysis. Okay, so what we've done here is we've done a bit of a quadrant approach, right? So we've tried to place all of the key brands in India based on what form they sell their protein in, and then obviously what price point they operate in. So no brainer, all the international brands, all of the basically premium brands sit in the high price point category. Then you've probably heard of Isopro, you've heard of Muscle Tech, Optimum Nutrition, so they obviously sit at the top. Then you have like the mid-sized guys, which are, like your Yoga Bar, your Muscle Blaze. Muscle Blaze is doing incredibly well in India. So I think that's also interesting to understand. And then again, at the lower price point, you have primarily Indian brands. You see Amul Pro there, you see Zago, you see, Health Cart, which is, a branch of Muscle Blaze. But yeah, so I think, and then on the left, there's just some quick analysis. But the key insight here is that the top 4 or 5 brands, which is Optimum Nutrition, Muscle Tech, Isopure, Muscle Blaze, they together have more than 60% of the market, right? So it's like we discussed, it's very brand conscious. So it's going to be a slightly tricky industry to get into. It's crowded also. Okay, so I'll just quickly take you all over this. Basically, there's 3 ways, right, that you can enter the industry, right? Because this focuses on market entry as well. So one is obviously where you import your final foreign product, right? So you basically just import it, you pay the duties on it, and then that's that, right? But that is very expensive because another key aspect of this is the regulatory aspect. But one, in India, there's a lot of permissions and a lot of rules and everything. And 2, the import duties go through the roof, right? So it becomes difficult to import the final foreign product. So if you see a lot of the guys like GNC and a lot of the others like Isopure, for example, they're all moving to approach 2, which is basically where you import the raw whey, because the duty on raw whey is a fraction of the the import duty on the final product, and then you manufacture it in India. You package it in India, right? So that's another approach. And then the last one is obviously these guys like Parag, Milk Foods, and Amul. They obviously do it end to end domestically, right? It's a complete Indian manufacturing play. Which is great given make in India, and like then they can charge a lower price point. But then the perception of quality obviously is questionable. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because I just want to cover the essence of it. But here, basically, what we've done is for powders, for bars, for ready to drink, we basically looked at what the popular packaging sizes are, what the price ranges are like, and how they're packaged. So it gives you a very good sort of understanding of how of like what their pricing is and how they package their products. So if you see basically, and then we've done some average costs just to see where it sits. I think we can go next. I think I'll skip this. Yeah. So again, this is the same thing, just for bars also. Yeah, where you basically just see what their price point is. Yeah. Okay, this is just a little bit about the domestic whey protein, guys, because it's important, because they're growing at 40%. Second, you want to look at their products. They all have their own brands. Third is they already have a large distribution network, right? Like Amul probably has the largest distribution network amongst food brands in India. So I think that's something to be aware of. And then obviously, they've all made large investments. It's an industry that's growing very, very significantly. So it gives them a lot of confidence to invest in it and grow in it as well. So basically the whole point here is that, okay, be careful of domestic competitors as well. It's not just threat from import brands or like, foreign brands that are very popular. Okay, this is just basically an overview of the top 3 competitors, and what their sort of background is, what channels they sell through. For example, GNC does their own stores, whereas most of the others just sell via pharmacies, supermarkets, trade partners. Product segments, are they in all the product segments? Then obviously innovation, how are they innovating? And then what are their key highlights or USP? So some of them are big on e-commerce, some of them focus on sports nutrition, some of them, like GNC has an own store concept, which is doing pretty well. So yeah, I think that's like how you'd want to evaluate the key competitors. Okay, So again, this is just like a quick key learning slide where basically Glanbia has done a great sort of strategy on alternate channel, where they're selling on sports sites and fitness sites like Sportskeeda. They also sell to paramilitary canteens. So they've got a good market share when it comes to, even the government and military. Muscle Blaze has done a fabulous job of their marketing. So they've done some really cool YouTube ads and TV ads that have worked really well. And Zago, which is an Indian brand, is basically maximizing their point of sales. And then they've started switching demographics, right? So they have started selling in a lot of these big stores, so supermarkets and stuff like that, because they're easy to grab and go because they have a ready to drink variant. Yeah, I think that covers it. Okay, so this is again probably the most important slide. What are the key implications? So I think the first one, so when you're doing this, obviously you want to try to get a good sense of what you're trying to capture. What are the 3 or 4 key themes you're trying to convey to your client? So one is that it's a concentrated market, right? Because there's already a lot of big import brands. There's a lot of big domestic brands that are getting into it. So and they have like a large share of the market. So and then there's this whole customer perception about being a better brand, etc. Then product quality. So in specifically in the powder segment, there's lower price sensitivity, because there's price in inelasticity. There's lower price in inelasticity for bars and ready to drink. Competitive positioning. Most of the players operate in powders and bars. Ready to drink is a lower priority, and some of the guys that are doing it are like Indian players. So it's clearly not a big market for the large foreign players. And online prices are 20 to 30% cheaper. So I think that's critical to understand because of the value chain. And then I think that covers it. We discussed the 3 approaches. I'm going to skip this case study because we've covered a lot of the competitive aspect. Okay, so now I'll just quickly take you guys over the channel and supply chain, which is the last key component, because it's super important to understand what the supply chain is, and then obviously what are the online offline channels and how to go about targeting them. Okay, so the way this works, it's pretty standard, right? So you have an importer who's basically your direct point of contact with the brand that you're trying to import, who typically buy in larger quantities. Then you have a principal distributor who's responsible for distributing the products amongst the secondary distributors. Secondary distributors are basically like your state-wise distributors, and they're responsible for selling to wholesalers and retailers. Again, wholesalers will buy in slightly larger quantities and then sell to your retailers and then to pharmacies and gyms also. And then retailers will basically buy on credit from the wholesaler and replenish when the stock runs out. And they include your supermarkets, specialty stores, and pharmacies. So again, we did some interviews with stakeholders. Again, just it's good to give like insights to the client about what people are saying, what industry participants are saying. So yeah, we discussed counterfeit products. They're a big challenge. Then we said online sales is key. Influencers play a massive role. And then the primary channels for distribution are basically like supplement stores, which are specialty stores, and online. And that covers this. Again, like we said, in India, online is typically 60%. So this is a super important slide because it gives like the client like a one slide view of like what are the different opportunities we have on the channel front. So online, you basically look at your own website, right? Then you have specialized portals which are focused on like the supplement space, right? So you'll have it's basically like a version of a specialty store, but it's a specialized online portal. So HealthCart's the best example. Then you have e-com through your traditional third-party provided platforms like Amazon and Flipkart. You have social media. I mean, now most people sell through Facebook, Instagram, etc. And then food delivery apps could be an opportunity in the future. And then again, on the offline piece, basically you have supermarkets, which are super important just because of how large they are and the number of visitors and their footfall, right? So, and you have some grocers and kirana stores, the premium ones. You have specialty stores like Ricken and New Life, and then you have chemists and pharmacies and gyms. So I think that gives you like a one view about like what the whole channel piece is for this industry. I'm not going to go into this, but basically gyms is a key focus area. So then we just try to cover what the market size of gyms is, how many health clubs are there, what the fitness penetration is by age, and then basically what are like some of the active members in gyms so that we can try to get a sense of what the customer base is. Specialty stores are probably the most important channel offline because they are obviously set up with the intention of selling only nutritional supplements and functional foods and whey protein. So that just basically you must have seen a Ricken, you must have seen a supplement station. So they basically just focus on selling these products, right? The advantage that they have is that they obviously are specialized. So the sales team and basically the whole environment is very, very focused. They're all trained and it's very authentic. The disadvantage is that they're typically priced at a premium. So they're at like 20% above 20% above what you'd get at a supermarket or a pharmacy store. This is just some key distributors. So it's important you understand your distributors if you're entering a new industry, and then what brands are associated to each of them. Go next. Yeah. We spoke about influencers and how important they are. So your key influencers are like your dietitians, nutritionists, gym instructors, personal trainers. Then obviously on the online front, you'll have social media influencers, celebrities and sports people, and then fitness bloggers. Okay, so this is basically on the whole online front, what your opportunity is, right? And then I'm not going to go into each one, but I'm just going to maybe tell you like 2-3 key takeaways. So one is obviously on social media, basically Facebook Marketplace, Instagram Shop Now, are becoming key outlets. Online influencers are really big because they sell through their posts and stories. Food delivery apps just offer you that convenience where it comes straight to you. And then own website, there's a small risk with it because you build that infrastructure and you invest in it, but then your sales volumes are very low because you can't drive traffic in that little time. But specialized portals like HealthCart are big, and then obviously you have Amazon and Flipkart and that are big in this space as well. Okay, so I think I'll spend a minute on this slide before we end the whole market assessment section. So we spoke about offline and online. So what we try to do here is we try to analyze each distribution channel in terms of few qualitative factors, right? So obviously and I think this is super important for you all to see because it gives you like a one slide sort of summary of what these channels offer you, right? So in supermarkets, you'll have, quite a few brands available, but the number of variants, what you call your product assortment would be like in terms of like the depth of SKUs, like, you won't have too many sizes, you won't have too many variants. Reliability is medium. And then they don't contribute too much to, whey protein sales. But it's still an opportunity. Grocers and kirana stores, it's virtually non-existent. Specialty stores, they have all the brands you can think of. They have like, a massive depth of like, different SKUs, different flavors, different sizes. So they're a great opportunity. Gyms and health clubs also, if you get the right agreement, they can be a great sort of outlet. And then some chemist opportunity or pharmacy opportunity is there as well. On the online front, again, own website, you probably have to invest a lot of time and energy, but it's a great opportunity. Web portals, there's already so much traffic on Amazon, Flipkart, so it'll be intuitive to just benefit from that and then sort of put your products there. Food delivery apps, uh, low opportunity. It's still something very niche. And then you still have social media as another alternative, but it's growing quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to stop here for a second and just maybe, ask you guys what y'all thought so far of the assessment. If we've covered broadly, the suggestions that y'all had, and yeah, and I think that is I think that's what I wanted to ask you guys. Is there any other point that y'all felt like we could cover? And then basically, I just want to see, take you guys over what was sort of the summary for the way forward, and then we can end this. So on the market assessment front, do you guys think y'all gain from it? Do you think that there's some aspects that, other aspects related to the industry or in general that we could look at? I mean, this is a great sign because if I've gotten it perfect so far, then great. But I don't know. But anyway, okay, let's just go over maybe the way forward. Okay, thank you, Darshan. Okay, Rahul's asking me how to go about data collection. That's a very important question. So I think that's why I'll leave the last 10 minutes for questions. So I'll probably take that question first, and then we can do a few more questions. But see, okay, so when it comes to the executive summary, there's a financial aspect, which is the whole target revenue and how you come about it. Basically, the target was to do like 30 crores in the first full year. On the customer front, you basically are looking at high income urban active gym and fitness conscious consumers. And the way to position it is as a medium to high range player in India. Then on the channel front, you need to have a strong network of influencers, which are gym trainers, nutritionists, and the likes. And then on the organization and technology front, you'll have to build a strong sales team. You'll have to build a strong like presence on the ground, especially in specialty stores. So yeah, so I think that's a little bit about like what the key implications of the summary is. Go next. So this is just basically looking at like seeing where the gap is, right? There's clearly a gap in the mid-priced RTD section in the and basically that's a potential area for us to focus. And then there's a opportunity. There's few brands in the high sort of price range in powder, so that is also an opportunity, because especially when Isopure and Optimum and all move to becoming like an Indian, like basically importing raw whey and manufacturing in India, that frees up some more sort of area to play. But it's a bit risky because obviously India is a very price conscious customer. But since they were looking to import, they wouldn't fit in the low or the medium bracket anyway. We can go next. Yeah. So I think just here, given all the analysis and given the initial top-down approach and everything, what we said was that basically your customer base can range from 3,000 to 4,000 loyal customers to 16,000 to 20,000 customers. A price for 6 on the ready to drink is going to be this much. The consumption data, and then you basically look at what your annual revenue could be, because they were focusing on the ready to drink play because it would add a dimension of innovation to them. And then their revenues could range from like 10 crore to like 55 crore, like depending on whether you take the conservative, the base, or the aggressive scenario. Yeah, I think that's fine. And then this is just what are some other key success factors, right? Because we haven't spoken about it as much, but branding and marketing is super important. You want to position yourself as a clean, health conscious brand. You want to focus on, offline marketing, at gyms and specialty stores, aggressive online marketing. Then you want to build a strong network of influencers, because we discussed how important they'd be. And then again, from a people standpoint, you want to obviously, look at building institutional relationships, e-com relationships, specialty stores. And then from a tech standpoint, also you need to, have a great portal and website. You need to have integrated inventory management system, omni-channel. Omni-channel is basically the most popular word right now, because it's basically about integrating all your different channels, right? Your offline channel, your online channel, and then syncing your inventory from them. So I think basically having that inventory management system and omni-channel sort of capability is important. So yeah. Again, like you see in the industry, the medium to long-term strategy is basically to move from importing your final packaged product to importing the raw whey protein and repackaging in India. The sheer benefit of that is monstrous, right? Because your duty structure in India is so complex, and the taxation and everything is so complicated that just doing that would save you so much money. And then you'd be able to fit into the lower medium price points. So yeah. This is just a summary. I'm not going to focus on it because we've covered most of them, fairly in depth. So I'm just going to skip this. But the whole essence of this slide is that, at the end, it's very important that you summarize your strategy, right? The way to do it is, maybe you can use and something that we use a lot is to look at a balanced scorecard framework. So what the balanced scorecard framework is that it's basically, you look at your financials, you look at your customer and product, you look at your processes and channel, and then you look at your org and technology. So it covers the entire spectrum of a company or the internal environment. So yeah, I think that is important, that you have a summary of like your strategy. Yeah. Okay, so again, see guys, the key part of consulting is that you always want to get another project with the same client, right? So you can do a great job of doing the project and designing the strategy, but it's nothing if you can't lay it down into logical next steps or into logical buckets, and then potentially push to do follow-up work with them, and then try to help them implement what you've designed for them, right? So again, this is typically what like the next steps would be on a project like this. You'd have to develop the execution plan for a month or two, then you'd have to go about executing it across the customer, product, marketing, process, people, and project management. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to sort of cover. Is there a next slide? Sorry. Okay, great. This is the best next slide that you can have.
Yeah, I think with this, we can start our question and answer session. So what I would like everyone to do is maybe just switch on their camera, and in case they have a question, they can just raise their hand and we can unmute you and you can go ahead and we can make it as interactive as possible.
Yeah, no, I'd really appreciate that. If you guys could turn on your video, I just wanted to leave the last 10-15 minutes to like, just conversation and any questions. I know there's one or two that have already asked a question. So maybe if you can turn on your video. I haven't had water for the last 2 hours. So, maybe you guys can turn on your video and then just have like, we can do like a nice conversation, and I'll try to guide you guys wherever I can. Okay, so I mean, what I'm going to do, Ahan, if you don't mind, is I'm going to take 1 or 2 questions that were there already, right?
Mm-hmm.
So great. So I think Rahul made a very important point about how do you go about collecting the data, right? So see, when it comes to consulting, data collection is is a super important thing, because the reason why the client's giving you the project is because they expect you to go and find that data. So when you're at a consulting firm, you typically have access to more resources, to databases, to research platforms. So your best bet is to go about is to leverage those. But in case you don't, there's a lot of reports out there, right? So when it comes to secondary research, your first source will be reports and publications. So for example, IBEF in India does like an industry report on almost every industry. So that's a great avenue or a great place to get good data. Secondly, there's a lot of information that you'd get in a news article, and I think it's a very underrated source of getting information. So news articles, reports, publications. I think those are the three key ways of getting good secondary data. And then obviously, if you're at a consulting firm, then you'll have access to research platforms like Statista. You'll have access to EMIS. You'll have access to Report Linker. Those are just some examples of like some of these platforms. So that's a great place to get good reports on a particular industry. And then the second aspect, which is primary interviews, you're on your own there, because I think that's just about going out into the field and doing what you can. I mean, I remember when I was doing this project, I used to just like leave office in the evening and then just like venture out. I mean, I used to go to like random pharmacies, talk to the guys there. And in India in general, if you guys realize, there's like this big people-driven connection, right? When you actually go out there and you speak to them, some of the insights you get is incredible. So I think from that standpoint, just basically leveraging both secondary and primary data from these two aspects would be key. Yeah.
So one question that I particularly had was that the company A, or rather the product X, which you were talking about. So what was the speed of entry for that product into the new market? And how did it go? Like, was it smooth, bumpy, as per your projections, if it got rolled out in the first place?
Yeah. So, Ahan, this is a good sign. You're a very curious person, which is a very important trait in consulting. So good on you. But no. So to be honest, guys, what we suggested to them in the final recommendation, and this was a tough one, because it's very hard to give the client advice straight to the point, right? So this Dutch company that was there was basically a very unestablished company, right? So they were only operating in the Netherlands. Their product didn't have too much sales. Their product was, they didn't have a great brand name, any sort of like IPR or any sort of patents or anything. So what we recommended to them is that, look, the whey protein industry is a great industry to get into, right? But we probably suggest that you don't go about spending $50 million or whatever buying that company or the rights to distribution here, and you can actually work with a contract manufacturer, or work with experts and just potentially build it in house, or do it in sync. And first the client was like, but that's like, what do you mean? That's not what we asked you for. And then I think over a few weeks the client was able to appreciate that we actually saved them a lot of money, and that if they wanted to go ahead with it, that probably going down the contract manufacturing route was the best potential option. And then with regards to time to entry, see, when you're building it in-house or organically, it's like a pretty long window. So it was like, at least 6 to 8, 6 to 10 months to get it together. So yeah. I mean, just guys, the questions y'all can ask me around anything, right? It's not specifically about this case. It's not even about case interviewing. It's in general anything about consulting. I've had the benefit of being on client side for months in different geographies. So if y'all want to ask about what it's like to work with difficult clients, what like how you manage clients' circumstances. Anything in general about consulting, happy to take those questions as well.
Hey Suraj.
Hi Dheeraj.
Hey. So I had a question regarding the phases of the projects.
Yeah.
So when we looked at phase 1B, we looked at regulatory under that, but wouldn't regulations be something we consider as a first step before entering the market? For example, if the whey protein company had like a material which wasn't allowed in the Indian markets, that wouldn't, so like the entire project would have to take a back step because of that. So like, is there a reason regulation was considered under 1B and not 1A?
No, so I mean, see, basically I think that objective slide is a little confusing because I think the way to look at it, Dheeraj, is when I was talking about the case interviews, is that it's very simple, right? Like you look at it from an external standpoint and an internal standpoint, right? So when you look at the external standpoint, you're right. There's a few very important things. So they're like the base level things. Like without those, there's no point going into the internal analysis. So one of them is obviously the regulatory aspect. The second is obviously the market, right? Because if there's no market for that product, if there's no market for that particular, and another thing we realized, for example, was that when you're doing whey protein in India, Dutch whey protein actually doesn't have a great perception. So I mean, that itself was like, the client was like, oh, really? Because the thing is, the Dutch whey protein is actually not correlated to high quality whey protein.
Okay.
It's considered to be subpar compared to like the UK or America, etc. So I mean, basically, just to answer your question, the first thing you'd consider are those base factors in the external research. You look at the market, you look at the regulatory angle, and those are like core, like you said, and then obviously you'd look at the competition and everything else after.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Also, did you have any challenges while doing this project? Because I'm sure like there would be some respondents who wouldn't really like be friendly when you ask them questions. So like, how exactly did you tackle that, and how exactly did you navigate through the primary interviews? Is basically my question.
Yeah, so that's actually a good question because it was really hard because, I was also like a 22, 23-year-old kid just roaming around with questionnaires and like just running around. And then, the chemist was like, dawai chahiye to aana, varna mat aana. So, so I feel like those challenges tend to come. But I think one thing, when you go into consulting that you have to realize is that it's a lot about confidence and who you are. So I feel like if you just go in with like that question and you leave it with him, nothing will happen. But then you have to really like be persistent, number one. Two, be patient. And three, I feel like you have to find a way to get answers to some questions. So it's always about starting in micro steps, right? So if you have 10 questions on your questionnaire, I mean, by the time you're at question 6, the cashier will be like, boss, it's not going to work out, head back home. But the key is, okay, fine. 1, 2, 7, and 8 are important questions. Let me get those out of the way. Let me get some insights here. And then I'll probably move on to the next guy and probably try to get more time from him. But yeah, in the process, I mean, it was hard because, I had to create the target list. I had to go chase that target list, and I had to, make sure I get the right insights, as a 22-year-old, guy. So it wasn't easy, but I think that's also the part of consulting that I enjoy, right? It takes you a little out of your comfort zone, which is good. Separate issue that I'm banned from Nobel Chemist because I went there 3-4 times and they were like, you need to come here to buy things, not ask questions. So yeah, but it was a great experience, if you ask me. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, any other questions? I mean, you guys can ask me about, yeah.
So Sooraj, I mean, I know that you've personally done a lot of consumer, retail, F&B projects. What are like the key trends and key learnings that you've observed through these projects?
I think key trends will be going back into my presentation and presenting, which I feel like right now I don't want to put you guys through. But see, I think when it comes to the retail space, right? You're right in the sense that it's one of my favorite industries. See, the thing is, in the retail space, what's very important to understand is that in today's day and age, guys, you can't be successful in retail without an omni-channel strategy. So what that means is that no matter how many stores you start, right? Like you look at Walmart, for example, right? Like no matter how many stores you have, like Walmart has more than 11,000 stores globally, right? So no matter how big you are, or no matter what scale you operate at, you're not going to be able to be truly successful in today's day and age without having a strong e-commerce play. I mean, for example, like, Walmart's sales were growing at, 3, 4, 5%, and that includes starting new stores, right? So I think that was like a big wake up call for them. And they were like, oh, we just need to make a huge progress on this whole online piece. And then they invested a lot of infrastructure into online. So I think that's one key thing that I'd want to share with you guys, that whenever anybody, especially when you're working in the retail space, and anyone tells you about a strategy, it's not possible without omni-channel. Secondly, especially when you're doing retail, um, you're there's too many aspects to it, right? You're like something as basic as, what how much shelf space you give each product or each category can make or break your store. So what I'm trying to say is that today, if you decide that, okay, fine, I want to have vegetables and fruits, occupy 20%, and then, biscuits occupy 5%, but then, there's a big, like, sort of trend, and like with fresh fruits and vegetables, like, people may not trust you or may not come to your store, you're done, right? Because you've already allocated 20-25% there. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind. And when you're doing retail, like micro markets, or like basically location analytics, is very important, right? Where you place your store is literally the make it or break it of your brand, right? So I mean, I worked with this client in retail, and it was almost funny, right? Because the way that they spent like a month vetting the location. So when we were trying to understand how they go about selecting stores, the client sent me a video of like the real estate guy on a motorbike. And on the motorbike, he had a video camera, and he was taking 4 rounds down the street, and he was saying that, okay, this store is located next to this, there's 5 people here, there's 7 people next to the bus stop. So, I mean, like, I was just like, how do you decide where to put a store on the basis of, a video camera and like just sending somebody up and down? But it's worked for them. I mean, their same store growth was like 6%. They were doing really well. So I think just being able to understand where you're placing your store, and what is the expected footfall is in that area. Is it is it more of an affluent crowd? Are there more women shoppers? Are there more youngsters? Is it a college going place? Then you'll have to adjust your strategy accordingly. So I think those are the 4 or 5 key things that I probably want to share with you guys.
So one question I have is that, if I'm not wrong, this project, the whole strategy all formed around this project, it was before COVID, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I just wanted to know, like, it would be interesting to know how different it would be, how differently your strategy would change with the onset of COVID, given you were talking about offline channels and stuff during the presentation. So yeah, just something interesting, um, a change in strategy if it was implemented during COVID, or how your strategy would change.
Sure. So I think that there's no, I mean, I wish I get the opportunity to work on it again post COVID, and then
Yeah,
probably
just
just
like a random
re-enhance it.
thought,
But no,
which would be
but no, that's a very fair question. So I think, see, there are very few industries that would have benefited from COVID, right? And I feel like the protein supplements industry is one industry that's actually benefited from COVID. And I say that because this whole healthy lifestyle trend that's come, this whole sustainability and diet trend that's come. I mean, like everyone in my house, people have lost 20 kilos, like, I mean, I'm just like, what's happening here? And I'm still the same. But I think what I'm trying to share is that this whole concept of like, living a sustainable life, having a sustainable diet, increasing your protein, etc., has become, it was already a big thing, but now it's become more of a trend. So I feel like the growth rates would have gone up. I feel like online's already 60% of sales, but with the retail stores shutting, you'd see a bigger shift towards online. So I think that's another thing that would probably be there. The third thing is that your entire supply chain would be disoriented, right? So I think you'd have to pay very careful attention into that. You'd probably have to tie up with third-party logistics players, and see, look at how you evade that crisis. So I think those are the 3 or 4 things that I'd look at. But I feel like this is one industry that's probably benefited, from this whole aspect. And then this whole trend of doing domestic production of the whey would become even more important, because if you look at the average lead time for imports, right, it's gone up it's gone up like drastically. Normally what would take 30 days to come is now taking 60 days to come or 90 days to come. So your business is at risk, right, in a way, Ahan, because you don't even know when your procurement or when your cartons are going to arrive. So what do you sell if you don't have the product? So I think that supply chain aspect and import aspect is something to keep in mind. I'm gonna sorry, I think there's a question from Srivatsan that says there are multiple pros of a consulting career. I love this one. But what do you think are the cons of the consulting career? And he's already stated one of the biggest ones, long working hours. So yeah, I think long working hours are a given. But I think, I feel like they're not as bad sometimes if you especially when you get very used to your work and everything, they're not as bad as what the perception is sometimes. But it's very ironic that I say that, but then again, so I think that's one con. I think the other con is that it's honestly it's more of a profession for, and this is something that I've been realizing more and more, and especially when you move senior into an organization, is that it's more of a profession for an extrovert. When I say that, it means that, sometimes, like, just being able to go that extra mile and conduct those extra primary interviews, be able to communicate better with your team, manage people, manage expectations. So it can get a little difficult if you're an introvert. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. And eventually in consulting, everything lies on sales, right? And to sell, it's very important that you network, you're social, etc., etc. So that's another con. And the third one, and it's something that I've been doing some retrospection on, because I've been in the space for a while. I feel like sometimes one of the biggest disadvantages of consulting is that often you go in, you build a strategy like this that's fancy, that covers everything, but you don't really know what happens, right? Like, you feel a little helpless because you've designed the strategy and you're like, oh, you can do this, your potential revenue is 30 crore, this is the channels to target, this is the customers to target, but sometimes you don't realize what happens, and then you're like, did it actually get executed, did it, and then you don't really get a chance to stay on that journey and sort of visualize your research and findings come to life, per se. So I think that's another disadvantage, and that's why sometimes people move from consulting into industry or into doing their own startup, because they're like tired of like being people that give gyan, quote unquote, because you don't really see what gets executed on the floor level. So yeah.
And I think one last question which I can ask you on behalf of all the people present here and all of HRites is that the background of our studies, the background of our college and all, which is pretty exceptional, of course. But what can you give to us, knowing that you two are from the same background, to make a career in consulting with respect to developing a skill set, developing that mindset, and also most importantly, going out and cracking those interviews?
Yeah, that's honestly a very good question. So I'm going to walk you guys through the value chain. So see guys, the placements at HR college are good, but there's very limited, there's very limited stuff on the consulting front. So you're going to have to search outside, whether you like it or not, you're going to have to take that effort to look outside, which is where networking becomes very important. Very, very important. I mean, I landed my first job because, I was very sure that I loved consulting. I love solving business problems. I loved that exposure to clients that you get so early on. So I must have reached out to 50, 100 people that I knew. And I was like, oh, do you know somebody in consulting? Do you know somebody here? Can you connect me to somebody that works here? And then, via, I mean, after a few months, I was like, oh, this guy knows somebody here, this guy knows somebody there. And then I did, some rounds of interviews. I got both the jobs. And then my rationale was to, work at a boutique firm first, because it just gives you that opportunity to, work directly with very senior people, to work directly with clients at a younger age. Sometimes at larger organizations, you have to, you have to do like certain research work or, for a few years before you get that client experience. So I was very fortunate because in my third month, I actually landed a client project. So I think there's an element of luck involved as well. But I'd say that like going outside the placements and like actually networking played a big role in it worked out for me really well. The second thing is, look, when you're doing case interview prep, and I've done a fair share of it in the past, is that it's there's nothing that replaces practice, right? I mean, if you think about, like, I mean, I know friends at IIM Ahmedabad, at ISB, IIM Bangalore. They tell me that they spend 2 months literally just casing. So they must have solved at least 150, 200 cases, right? Which is a significant number of cases. And that means that you've done at least 30, 40 profitability ones, you've done 20, 30 market entry ones, you've done some market sizing ones. So you've gotten a great sort of flavor of everything. So I'd say that practice is often underrated, but it's the most important thing. Sometimes even if you don't remember your framework, but you're logical, you'll remember like nuances of what you solved in the other cases, and you'll be able to bring the dots together. So I think being consistent with your case prep is very important. And yeah, I think that's the key, right? The networking, case, like diligent case prep. It's not as much like, like at HR, sometimes we don't attend college, sometimes, we chill a little bit more, than we need to. But for something like this, it's very important that you're, focused, because it's a cutthroat profession to get into. I mean, there's like a handful of consulting firms, and there's like a massive pool of talent, right? Because people from engineering backgrounds come, people from finance backgrounds come, people from arts come, so and then you have only like 10, 12, 15 consulting firms. So just be diligent, and I think just network. I mean, you guys already know me now, so you can feel free to reach out to me. But I think outside of that also, there'd be like a fair number of HR alumni. So that's a good place to start, or your friend circle, and then just try to see, what opportunities lie ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Sooraj. So just to wrap it up, thank you once again for this insightful session, and taking out time on a Saturday afternoon, which has turned into an evening, which has been pretty for all of us. And I'm sure that all of us present today, we got to learn a lot and gained a lot more knowledge than what we study at college also. And given that case interviews and solving case studies have not been a part of our curriculum, but that it's an essential requirement, as you said, for job interviews and B schools, this session has genuinely helped all of us get better equipped for interviews, as well as career challenges. And I don't think we would get an opportunity like this anywhere, where we are directly interacting with a consultant and he's letting us pass through a live project he's worked on. So I think we should all consider ourselves pretty lucky. So thank you once again, Sooraj. And in case anyone of you all have any questions, you all can either ping us and we can reach out to him, or you all can directly reach out to him on LinkedIn as well. His name is Sooraj Mehta. He's pretty active there. And so thank you once again. And lastly, I would also like to thank Pooja ma'am and Kanupriya ma'am for always supporting us. And last but not the least, thank you to all the participants for joining today.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Ahan. Thank you, Kanupriya, ma'am. I've worked with her very closely when I was at HR and in Actis. If you're there, ma'am, thank you so much for everything you've done for us. And, thank you guys for tuning in. Like Ahan said, I'm happy to always, help you guys stay connected. You can add me on LinkedIn. If I can, be of any other help, happy to help. And, good luck to you guys. I look forward to interacting with you all again soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.